Hey everyone, greetings from a very rainy Mumbai, India this weekend. First up, let me thank all of you for such a fantastic response to my very first vlog. I feel genuinely privileged to be connected to all of you and glad that I'm able to utilize this platform to share my views and thoughts on various topics with all of you. Several of you sent me a lot of questions, made comments, had conversations with me about my very first vlog, and so I thought for this week we'll perhaps start right there. It ties in very closely to the theme of this week as well. So this week, as you know, was Teachers' Day in India. And a lot of you came back and said, AJ, you perhaps made a mistake. You did not point out that when managing subordinates, one of the core fundamentals is mentoring them, coaching them, and teaching them how to be better. A lot of you also said, AJ, when I set my expectations with my boss, that's one thing. But he also has to realize that he has to mentor me. How do I get them to do that? So let's pick up from there. I think you're all right. I think you're all right in saying that mentoring and coaching is extremely important when managing subordinates. In fact, if you've read the Harvard article on the 6 types of management, I think the one type that's the most successful is the type where people spend time managing and coaching their subordinates. And yet it happens to be the least frequently utilized method. Now let's do a small experiment maybe. Let me ask you these questions. First up, for those of you who are managers right now, how many of you genuinely feel that you coach and mentor your subordinates? Let's raise your hands. A lot of you did, didn't it? Well, let's ask the second question. Do you as subordinates feel mentored by your boss and your manager? I bet a lot of you did not raise your hands there. So why is this dichotomy? These are both two sides of the same coin. Well, in my view, I think it results because people often confuse mentoring, coaching, and teaching to be all the same stuff. And there is a core difference between them. Let's talk about what most managers end up doing. There are 3 pieces where people require coaching, mentoring, and that is around problems, projects, and people. So, say I come up to my boss with a particular problem. What's the general response that most of you have ever gotten from your boss? It's always been the solution to the problem. Now, a manager would often say, that's the right thing to do. It's the right thing. It's my responsibility as a manager to give the right solutions to my subordinates so that they can learn how to tackle those problems in the future. But let's think about that for a minute. What did we as managers just do when we gave the solution to a problem or the solution to how to think about a project or the solution on how to manage a people issue back to our subordinates? I think we taught them the task itself. Whereas mentoring is more about teaching people and molding their thought process around things. I think that's the core difference. Excuse me. A lot of us essentially end up teaching our subordinates how to accomplish tasks. We believe that if we're able to pass on these specific skills of problem solving, of thinking about projects in a structured manner, if we are able to teach them how to solve a problem they're having with a particular subordinate, then that's our job. That's a job well done, and that's equivalent to mentoring. Whereas from a subordinate's perspective, that is not perhaps a skill that they can translate into the future. In fact, the subordinate now starts becoming dependent upon you because they believe that if they came to you, they would often get the answer to the problem that they have. How many of you have had subordinates come to you and tell you that we knew if we would come to you, we'd get the solution? That's a good thing. I'm not saying that's bad. But perhaps some reflection is essential to understand, is that really mentoring? Is that really coaching? The way I've learned, or I think I've learned to really mentor, and I'm not saying I'm perfect, there are often times I give solutions myself. But the way that at least I've learned to mentor people is to start perhaps with a question rather than an answer. Some people will say, well, what's the difference between asking a question? If someone's asking you a question about something, why are you replying back with a question? Well, I'm a geek. And so let me perhaps give you an analogy that is very geeky in nature. You've all watched The Matrix, right? Okay, for those of you young gens who've not watched The Matrix, go watch it. Great movie. There are 3 parts, by the way. There's this particular scene, if you remember, where there is Seraph accompanying Neo to go to the keymaker. And there's this bundle of keys that he has. Asking a question is akin to having that bundle of keys with you that can unlock doors. Whereas giving an answer is opening a door and leading them into one room. And I think that's the real difference. By asking questions, you provoke thought, you provoke reflection, you provoke their wheels of their minds to start churning a little bit more. So start with the question. Start with the question about how they would approach the problem itself. And don't stop there. Keep asking the question again. Keep asking them, and what else would you do after that? Keep on taking them along in the journey for their thought process. A lot of young individuals, a lot of young mentees will essentially come up and say the first thing that comes out of their mouth. They'll just blurt it out without even thinking. It's not until you ask them that second question, and what else, will they sit back and reflect and think more about how else they could perhaps solve the problem. If it happens to be a people problem, I often ask them, why? And keep asking them the why till it comes down to the fundamental basis of the problem itself. Giving them the solution often ends up solving superficial issues and never goes down to the depth of the problem. Remember, as managers and as bosses, your job is not just to look good. Your job is to make your team look good, your team be better, your team to become better managers in the future. And that's really what mentorship and coaching is all about. I think that's one way to do things. What do you feel? Send me your comments about how you approach mentoring, what questions you ask, what answers you give. And of course, if you have opposite views to mine, I'm very, very happy to discuss it. But again, keep watching, keep learning, keep growing. Engage on the platform. I wish you all the best. Have a great week.